Gabriel Pierne's Impromptu Caprice is among the standard harp compositions that most harpists and harp enthusiasts will study. So composers often come to me and ask if this piece specifically is a piece worth studying. Short answer, yeah, there's some very interesting things in it. Long answer, let's go through it together. Hi, I'm Danielle from Compose Harp, and I want to help you learn how to write for the harp with confidence. So in today's video, we are going to review 4 topics in the Impromptu Caprice. Number 1, the use of Bisbigliando. Number 2, Enharmonics. 3, we're going to look through some fairly trepidous pedal changes and how to avoid them. And number 4, staccatos. And I'll also throw in a little bonus review of a slightly awkward section at the end of the piece. So number 1, Bisbigliando. Some harpists feel that this technique is overused, but it does work pretty well on the harp. If you want to learn more about Bisbigliando in general, check out the video I made about Bisbigliando that discusses this and several other excerpts. I will link it above. Impromptu Caprice opens with a nice little Bisbigliando trill, and this motive comes back throughout the piece. In this case, the Bisbigliando is actually written out, so it does give the impression that it's supposed to be measured. We also use enharmonics, and this will tie into the next point. If we were to play it exactly as written with using the E flat and A flat in both hands, that's how it would sound. It has become standard in performance practice for us to spell it enharmonically using D sharp and G sharp in the left hand, just to give it a little bit more fullness. So number 2, enharmonics. This piece uses a lot of enharmonics that are not actually written in the music, but are necessary. So pro tip, if you're writing for harp, spell the notes how they're actually played, because it's much easier that way to track pedals, track notes, rather than having to calculate enharmonic spellings in our head. So we mentioned already the use of enharmonics at the beginning. We also have to use a lot of enharmonics in the main arpeggio theme. If you look at the score, you'll see a lot of doubled notes. For instance, the second line on page 2, you see 2 E flats. We don't actually play those as written. Just to give you an idea of the tempo. Now, moving on to the second line, that would require us to play those repeated notes that fast. Which isn't possible. So we respell the first E flat as a D sharp, like so. Which makes it flow a lot better. So if you were to write this, write it D sharp, E flat, not E flat, E flat. This happens throughout the main theme, so whenever you hear those repeated notes, think enharmonics. The third place we use enharmonics is when the introduction comes back in the middle of the piece, but instead of an arpeggio, we use a chordal glissando. So in this case, we want an A flat glissando, and we achieve that effect by doubling D sharp, E flat, G sharp, A flat, and B sharp, C. So it's a cool effect if you want to use a glissando but have it imply a chord. If you want to learn more about enharmonics, be sure to check out the video I made discussing enharmonics. I will link that above. Now, the use of enharmonics always results in extra pedal changes. So if you are considering using enharmonics, you need to actually map out the pedals that will be required and make sure that it is possible and not going to detract from the flow of the piece. We have a few very trepidous pedal sections in this piece. This is for two reasons. Number one, because the foot is having to move to a different pedal every half beat. And second, because there's multiple cases where you have to go from flat all the way down to sharp and all the way back to flat, which is very difficult to do quietly. Let me demonstrate. So the first section is page 4, the top line. And as you can see, my right foot is having to move very quickly around the harp. But in this case, it's only moving by half position. In other words, flat to natural or natural to flat. Now the second example is where it gets a little bit trickier because the left foot is once again having to move every half beat, but is also doing the whole step pedal changes, or going from flat to sharp, sharp to flat. So as you see my foot moving around the harp, there's not a lot of time for it to ensure that the pedal is locked in place before hopping over to the next pedal. So something to keep in mind, it might be worth the risk of the pedals to achieve the Enharmonics, it might not. That's a question that you are going to have to weigh as you're making the compositional decisions. So let's take a look at the use of quasi-staccato in this piece. We generally, in harp writing, we discourage repeated notes, and that is why the enharmonics are necessary in the beginning of the piece, where we have D sharp, E flat, instead of just repeating the E flat. But sometimes you can carefully use repeated notes in order to achieve a staccato effect, and this piece does that in the middle section. When you move to the C minor section in the middle, the hands are repeating the same notes, alternating. And this requires having a slight pause between the notes, a slight stop in sound, and that's achieved by repeating the exact same notes. If you were to repeat it with different notes, it would be far more resonant, like using the enharmonics for the opening Bisbigliando. But in this case, we do want the drier effect, so repeating the notes achieves that. So the little bonus section I have for you is at the end where the main theme comes back. All the way through this piece, the hands are using directional placing, directional arpeggios. In other words, the notes are all playing in one direction, which is very easy on the harp. But in the return of the theme, it's transformed so that the notes are out of order. It sounds really cool, but it is far more difficult on the harp. Let me demonstrate. So in the original theme, the hands are playing in order. In the return of the theme, this alternating hand position, 1, 4, 2, 3, is more awkward and requires far more finger independence than the original. So something to keep in mind. If you're curious as to why, make sure you check out the video I made on groupings and placings. I will have that linked above as well. So this concludes my review of Pierne's Impromptu Caprice for harp. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave any questions in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you next time.